Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 8th Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have two significant presentations we'd like to share with the board, the full board, and the public. The first one is on the integrated math program. This is a process that we've been long talking about in the district. It has a lot of momentum behind it from our math department and our math teachers, and I think it's going to go a long way into addressing many of the problems and structures that we were looking to improve in our math program. So with that, I'm going to ask Jason Lilly, who's supervisor of secondary math.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk about the integrated math program and some changes to our math sequencing. As Mr. Copeland stated, this is something we've been looking at for a while now. Back in 2016 is when this process actually began, through an audit of our curriculum, specifically our middle school curriculum, even more specific 8th grade math. When we looked at that audit, some of our findings that came out, some of which were not surprising, is that we have a very algebra-centric curriculum in place. Our middle school math program was designed to prepare students for algebra rather than focusing on specific grade level standards. One of the things that stood out for us was that our 8th grade math standards were being inserted into other courses and taught in conjunction with other math courses rather than being called out specifically and having a course dedicated to 8th grade. There are a couple things that are part of this integrated math presentation tonight, one of which is a shift in content, the other is a shift in how we deliver that content. Just to highlight, one of the things that we've done historically in teaching mathematics is we've taken the approach of I do, we do, you do, where the teacher models, then you kind of do it together with the students, and then you let the kids try it themselves. One of the shifts that we're trying to make as we go forward is the idea of letting students take charge and ownership of the learning. So the approach would be more like you do, and then we do, and we talk about it. So that's a big shift in our practice. The change in content is a shift from teaching Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 separately, and instead teaching them in an integrated fashion where each year students experience some algebra, some geometry, and some statistics. In the third column, you can see how this proposal is aligned with our strategic plan. I've said this before, but one of the things that I feel Mr. Copeland does that's exemplary is when you come to him with a new idea, his intentionality in follow-up questions and really trying to get at the heart of what you're bringing to the table. And in this instance, the question was, what problem does this solve? This particular proposal solves lots of different issues, lots of different things that have come up, but specifically that idea that we want to call out the 8th grade math standards as being important and giving them time for students to master them. And the other thing that has come up in multiple conversations is the fact that at our middle school level, many of our students are experiencing the idea of double testing at the middle level, meaning either in 7th grade or 8th grade, students are taking a PSSA and a Keystone exam. So this helps alleviate that situation as well for most or majority of our students. And something we're always looking to improve is the student engagement in mathematics, and that's where that student-centered inquiry approach comes in. So what exactly is integrated math? Kind of talked about it a little bit already. Integrated math is a shift in content. It's instead of teaching math separately and in silos, it's the idea of teaching some algebra, some geometry, and some data analysis each year throughout the math sequence. And what that does is it eliminates some of the gaps that our students experience by teaching it separate. Currently, our K through 7 math program is taught in an integrated fashion, and then again, starting with pre-calculus. It's the courses in between where we don't teach in an integrated way. The integrated math courses are the way that the majority of the rest of the world teaches mathematics. Colleges and universities absolutely recognize those courses because the United States is really one of the only countries that doesn't teach in that way. So this isn't some new idea. It's something that the rest of the world does in the way that they help students understand and apply mathematics. Because of that, it actually is more in line with our IB program. IB being an international baccalaureate, this integrated approach is the foundation for international baccalaureate across the world. In some previous presentations, Georgine Heibeck has been present. Unfortunately, tonight she was unable to attend due to family issues, but we managed to bring Georgine to the presentation anyway. So Georgine is going to have some speaking parts, and I will annotate a little bit here and there, but Georgine is going to have the opportunity to take you through what an integrated math lesson actually looks like. She has been someone who's been involved heavily with our piloting of this program, and she's going to take you from start to finish through a lesson in integrated math. So with that, here's Ms. Heibeck.
Today in Algebra 1, we began Module 2 of the integrated math program. Here is the first problem the students have been given.
So in this first problem, students are given a situation where they have a piggy bank, and every day at one point in time, they're putting a specific amount of money into the bank, 5 pennies every day. It's a specific isolated event that happens every day. Students are asked to use a table, a graph, and an equation to create a mathematical model for the number of pennies in the piggy bank on any given day. So multiple representations are being used here. One of the things I want to share before I go any further with Ms. Heibeck is on this math day, students are given 4 problems. That is the lesson for the day, to work through these 4 questions, this being number 1. So keep that in mind as we move on.
In the last model, we talked a lot about arithmetic versus geometric sequences. This problem is an example of an arithmetic sequence, and the kids are representing the information 4 different ways: a table, a graph, an explicit function, and a recursive function.
So you notice the multiple representations here. We have our table, we have a graph, we have an explicit formula and a recursive formula for the same scenario. So 4 different ways of representing the information that was given to the students.
Here is the second problem that the students have for this problem set.
So in the second problem, very different scenario, but again, it's relevant and it's real. It's about a pool that holds 1,500 gallons of water. When they started, there were 5 gallons of water in the pool, and the person, like any normal person, wouldn't want to stand outside and watch the hose fill a pool of that size, so they're tasked with figuring out how long would it actually take to fill the pool so they can go do something else and then come back before the pool's overflowing and they're wasting lots of water. So that's the scenario, real world, but the students have to explore and share their thinking about how they would come at this problem.
This problem is also an example of an arithmetic function. However, what I'm trying to have the students understand with this problem is the pool is filling continuously. In the first problem, she's adding 3 cents to the piggy bank every day. So that's what we would call a discrete function. It goes 3 cents every day at the same time, whereas here with the pool, it's filling at a constant rate of 2 gallons per minute. So you'll notice there's only one function this time for the table, because part of our discussion is when is it necessary to use a recursive function and when does an explicit function make more sense.
So throughout this lesson, we're talking about explicit functions, recursive functions, we're talking about generating tables, we're talking about plotting points, and obviously this has been linear so far. We're also talking about discrete events versus continuous events. So there's lots of different ideas going on at the same time. This just happens to be the lesson she was working on Friday. So this isn't something we just put together. This just happens to be the lesson she was on.
Here's a real-world example of a person putting money into the bank. The only difference with this one is he's going to get the interest at the end of every month because we're trying again to help the kids understand the difference between a discrete function and a continuous function. However, in this case, they have to know how to use the percent to increase the amount of money that he is saving. And again, they're going to create a table, a graph, and both equations for the function.
So as you notice, some of the directions are the same. Table, graph, function. But in this case, now percents have been brought in and percent of a number each time. So growing by a percent each time. A little different.
And as you can see here, we have another discrete graph. The points are not connected. However, this time it's an exponential function. Typically in Algebra 1, we don't teach exponential functions. However, it makes sense and it's appropriate here since we've done arithmetic and geometric sequences to carry that through with the tables and the graphs, just as we did with the lines in the first two questions.
So here, one of the challenges we have in our current curriculum is in Algebra 1, we focus on Algebra 1. This integrated approach allows us to move beyond Algebra 1, not to something that's necessarily more difficult, but to something that makes sense to put here. This mathematically connects with what they've been working through.
This is another problem that represents a geometric sequence. Now we're draining the pool, which is going to happen at a continuous rate. So again, we want the students to understand the difference between discrete and continuous. And now we've also added in the layer of the difference between when the graph will be linear versus when the graph will be exponential.
So think about the previous problem where someone was earning 3% interest at a certain point in time, whereas this is a pool draining at 3%. That doesn't happen at specific moments in time. It's continuous. So that idea of discrete versus continuous comes back around again, but in a real-world way with something that students can visualize.
Again, here's a chance for me to let the students know that in this case, a recursive function wouldn't make sense because, again, our graph is continuous and not discrete. One of the things I really like about the integrated math program is a lot of the sections end with probing questions for the students to see what they've seen in the problems, what they've learned during the process. And this is a great chance for kids who maybe picked it up right away and have a lot of ideas. They can use this space to be as specific as possible and write as much information as they can. But for students who struggle, really what we're looking for here is, did they notice something that's similar? Did they notice something that's different between these problems? And this helps to open a discussion when the kids come up to present in front of the room and talk about their graphs, because it gives them something to think about when they come to describe what's happening in each of the functions.
This is something that really stands out about this particular resource that we've been using. Really low entry point, but a really high ceiling. So it allows different students access in different ways and at different levels while still talking about the same topics. So this really stands out. The other thing you can see highlighted in this particular slide, some of our professional development over the last couple of years have been around the Marzano strategies, high yield strategies, one of which is similarities and differences. So that's called out here in this instance. So think about the lesson. There were 4 problems. I tried to highlight a little bit for you how they were connected and yet how they were different. And here it's asking those exact questions. So what did you notice as a student that was the same about some of these problems, and what did you actually notice that made them different? They could answer this question based on the graph, the charts, the table, the formulas, lots of different ways that they could answer this question depending on what they noticed and how they noticed things themselves.
At the end of the lesson, we discuss any vocabulary that was new to the lesson or any vocabulary that they need to be reminded of from previous lessons. So today's main focus was the idea of a discrete versus a continuous graph, and also a linear versus an exponential graph. So at the end of class, we make sure that everyone has these 4 definitions written down, and also they're posted in my classroom throughout the whole module.
So this is just important here because the emphasis is on using mathematical language appropriately. Do you understand what the terms mean? Did you see some of the different things that were highlighted throughout this lesson, and can you talk about them in a meaningful way? Can you use the language the right way? She mentioned in this slide about posting them in her room. That is part of this, getting kids to use the language appropriately. They have to see it and use it and remember it. So they're writing it down themselves, but you're also posting it in the room for students to reference as they explain different things throughout the module. A module is essentially a unit. So as you work through the unit, you constantly come back and reference the language that's been used throughout. Things like the pool and the bank and the interest, they also come back around. So there are touch points and touchstones that the kids can relate back to. So you say, oh, remember when we did that pool problem when the pool was draining? Oh yeah, that's this. So there are touch points like that throughout each module that help the kids make sense and continue to move forward with the math.
There are three main sections of the homework. The first one is the Ready. In the Ready section, this is a review of topics the students covered either in the previous module, or it's a review of topics that are from the previous year's math.
So this was Module 2. This was the beginning of Module 2. In Module 1, the students worked on coming up with explicit and recursive formulas for sequences. So this was a review of that. But the reason this is here is because you notice throughout these 4 questions, some of these were plotted as individual points, which lend themselves to look like a sequence of numbers, whereas others were continuous and we actually connected the line. So it's kind of taking them back to something they've talked about to make sense of the real-world application that they're seeing now. Something else I want to highlight in this slide is number 9. Question number 9, this is sort of an extension problem. Georgine mentioned that, that idea of low entry, high ceiling. This question number 9 on here asks students to make predictions. So if you have a student who, even though this is a review of previous information, this is still a stretch problem based off of information they learned in the previous module. So this is where it's not just repetitive homework. And honestly, each of these questions, I worked through these, they are very, very different from each other. It may look like 8 questions that are doing the same thing 8 times, but they're really not. They are very, very different. And again, this is the review to allow access to the new information.
The second part of the homework is called SET. The SET part of the homework problems is based on what you just learned today. So in these examples, we're trying to figure out, do the students truly understand the difference between what makes something continuous and what makes something discrete? And the nice thing about this section is rather than just giving the students graphs with dots that are connected or not connected, it's actually giving them real-world examples of things that could be continuous and things that could be discrete.
Typically a math text, to help students understand the difference between continuous and discrete, you will see lines drawn across the coordinate plane that are either continuous or they're broken. They have skips or holes in them. Instead, what this does is gives them real-world scenarios and says which of these are happening at specific instances of time and which ones are happening continuously over a period of time.
The Go section of the homework is a review of a topic they've done before. However, the difference between the Ready and the Go is that the Go section is leading the students to what they're learning next. So later on in this module, we're going to talk about slope and linear equations. And the slope is a unit rate on the coordinate plane. So what it's having the students here is it's reminding them of what a unit rate is and having them practice finding unit rates.
And unit rates are something that would have happened several years prior. So it's, again, touching on something that they've seen before, they're familiar with, but then on top of that, connecting it to a real-world scenario, and then it's going to extend that and build that into, as she said, we're talking about slope. So that's pushing into the Algebra 1 idea.
I'd like to take the time now to highlight what is different between the integrated math approach and the traditional approach. The number one thing that I have found is the engagement of the students in the class. So when they're given a problem, they're asked to come up with the conclusions. They're asked to figure out a way to solve the problem, to represent the problem. I am not in any way giving them the information. They come up with the information and then we discuss it and come up with the vocabulary associated with it, and then I lead them down a path. But truly, most of the work is done by them in the classroom. So student engagement, I would say, is the number one thing that I get out of this program. We use a lot of math language because the students are expected to present their information to the class. So we take turns using a document camera. They present their graphs or their tables and discuss how they came up with the numbers. All of the problems that we have done so far have had multiple representations that the students can use. So it's not always just a formula or just a graph. Sometimes it's a table, sometimes it's a picture. Sometimes they have to come up with the problem themselves. So I will give them a graph or a table, and they have to create a situation where those numbers would be appropriate. One of my favorite parts about the homework is that it's a spiral with a purpose. It's not just let's review old topics that have been covered already, but it has it in such a way that those topics lead to what you're doing in the class right now or what's coming up in the next unit or in the next module. My role in the classroom has become more of supporting the students' inquiry rather than spoon-feeding them information. We discuss it as a whole class, but before I've told them anything, they get a chance to look at the problem themselves and take it apart and dig into the information. So what that helps later on, when they've seen a problem that we haven't discussed in class, they have an approach for how do I look at this problem? What's a way I can represent this information? Everything's not cookie cutter. So this helps a lot with the students' understanding of real world examples. And then another way to say this is they're really applying the mathematics. There's a lot of science in this program. There's a lot of math of finance in this program. There's a lot of information that they could use every day in the quote unquote real world. So these are not just made up problems that the students are using because they fit the math. This is math that fits the situation.
And so that's what an integrated math lesson looks like. That's what it's all about. Earlier I talked about the two different pathways that exist, the one that exists in most of the rest of the world and the one that exists in the United States. But even within the United States, it varies. There are many places that use an integrated approach. But what I want to highlight here are a couple things. One is, regardless of the sequence that you choose, whether you stay with a traditional approach or you take an integrated approach, the time that it takes to get through the same amount of information is the same. There are 3 years of time right now for a student to successfully complete Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. It also takes 3 years of time to complete Integrated 1, Integrated 2, and Integrated 3. To understand the curricular differences here, I think the easiest way to explain that is with a 2/3, 1/3 approach. If you look at a traditional sequence, there are 2 courses dedicated to algebra and 1 course dedicated to geometry. So 2/3 of that time, students spend learning algebra topics. 1/3 of that time, they spend on geometry. The difference between a traditional and integrated pathway is in the integrated pathway, each year of the 3 years, 2/3 of the time is dedicated to algebra and 1/3 of the time is dedicated to geometry and also data analysis blended in there. So you still spend over the 3 years the same amount of time on the different topics. The difference being you don't take a year off in between to study geometry and then come back to algebra. Every year, the same way we do K through 7 right now, and then pre-calculus and beyond, students would spend time with algebra, geometry, and data analysis each year of the 3 years. But in no way does this change affect the amount of time that it takes a student to move from our 7th grade math course to a pre-calculus course at the high school. The time is the same. What we do during that time is what's different. So why would we change? I feel like the lesson I took you through with Georgine talking gives you a sense of what the difference is and the value that it has. It connects to real world. It makes sense of the math. It makes it relevant. It gives it meaning. And that's what students need to help understand mathematics. It also gives us additional time because the integrated approach only spends 2/3 of each year on algebra. You don't actually complete all of Algebra 1 until you're in the 2nd year. In that first year, you've only completed about 2/3 of what we consider to be Algebra 1 right now in our current sequence. Because of that shift in content, the Keystone exam actually moves to the 2nd year of an integrated program. So essentially what that does is shifts it away from the majority of our students at the middle school and moves it to the high school. The other thing that we have with our integrated approach here that's different, it creates greater flexibility between our college prep and our honors level courses. Even if a student were to take an honors course and then the year in between shift to a college prep level of the course, they could still then in the third year move back to an honors level integrated approach, because the difference between the college prep and the honors and an integrated approach is extension. How much further you go, and there are some optional topics. Those optional topics do not in any way prevent a student from moving into the honors program the next year, nor are they needed to maintain your level in the honors program. So much more flexibility than we have currently. The lesson that Georgine took you through is from the Mathematics Vision Project. The Mathematics Vision Project came out of Utah. The authors of this program are the people who provided our training for our pilot teachers, myself included. And those authors, at least one of those authors, is now nominated to be on the NCTM board. That's National Council for Teachers of Mathematics. This is a program that's taking off. It's being used around the world and around the United States. I've mentioned before, but this is something that's used in Carborough, Chapel Hill School District, and has now been adopted by Wake County, which is the biggest county in North Carolina. One other thing I want to highlight here is this is an open source resource. The only costs really associated with this particular program are for training the teachers and the staff to deliver it in the way that it should be delivered. The resources themselves are open source and free, and we're allowed to modify them as we see fit to best fit the needs of our kids. To put that in perspective, what typically happens with a resource purchase, we make a big purchase and, let's say we spend $60,000 for student books. The vendors are happy to throw in the teacher resources for free and give us a deal, and that saves us maybe $2,000. This is the reverse. We could spend maybe $2,000 on teacher education on how to deliver this, and they provide us the $60,000 of student resources for free. So it's the exact opposite of how we've typically made a purchase for resources for a program. So that's just something I wanted to highlight on this slide, with that being open source, open access for us. This slide is a new version of what the math sequence would look like. I'm just going to highlight a couple things. One being we have additional acceleration points that didn't exist in our current sequence. There are different color arrows on this slide. What they represent is this. If you see a black arrow, that represents moving from one course to the very next course in the sequence, maintaining your current level. If you see a green arrow, that is an opportunity to accelerate. What you'll notice is now after 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, there are opportunities to accelerate. The idea behind that is we need to meet kids where they're at as they mature mathematically at the middle level. We don't currently have that option. We try our best to meet their needs, but this provides additional opportunities that haven't been there previously. The other thing that you'll see is there are some red arrows. Red arrows represent an opportunity to move down a level. Believe it or not, we do have requests for students to slow down. We currently have a hard time slowing kids down because of the way the sequencing works. So this provides opportunities for students to slow down, and then once they've slowed down, if they feel like they're ready to move back up, that opportunity exists the very next year to move back up. So we have flexibility up and down within this sequence. We have summer opportunities. So this is a change in our programming, but what you notice is no matter how a student makes it to integrated 1, they will have in some way, somehow completed Mathematics 8, which currently does not exist in our current sequence. So that's the big change. Briefly about phase-in. The right way to do this is to phase something in 1 year at a time, not a blanket change. So for the upcoming year, students who would typically be moving into Algebra 1 would be moving into Integrated 1. Students who have already or are currently in Algebra 1, they're either already completed or they're in Algebra 1, they would continue to complete the current sequence as it exists. So an Algebra 1 student this year would move into Geometry next year, and they would finish with Algebra 2. So the phase-in would be 1 year at a time. Integrated 1 would phase in next year, Integrated 2 the year after that, and Integrated 3 the year after that. 1 year at a time, so that students who have entered the integrated program would experience it all the way through. Students who have already started the traditional program would finish the traditional programming. This final slide is kind of a summary of all the changes that are being proposed. The pilot began last year. It's continuing this year. It is currently across all 4 buildings. The proposal includes changing the name of pre-algebra to Math 7. That is essentially what that course delivers. Changing the name so that it fits the sequence. Again, offering a Math 8 course, which we currently do not have. That would be for next year as well. There's also something you'll see that we don't have currently. That's a Math 7-8. That's an accelerated 7th grade course that compacts the 7th and 8th grade standards into 1 year. That is also the recommendation from the Common Core. The Common Core recommends at the middle level, the compacted course, the accelerated course that should exist, that makes most sense for kids, is a 7-8. Currently, we embed most of our 8th grade standards into our algebra courses, and that's very challenging. You see the Math 8 Summer Bridge option, and then you see Integrated 1, 2, and 3, and the courses that they would replace, with next year being the first year of this phase-in.
Jason, just a couple of questions. So when you say piloted in the high school, you're talking about various units or lessons?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not a full,
It's not a full-blown.
not a full course pilot. And just to emphasize the last 2 slides, we're well aware that we've had a number of math innovations in the last several years. So this was purposefully done in a way that could step out the implementation without a wholesale disruption of kids' programs as we move along. With that,
Thank you very much for the presentation. I know that you did this at the curriculum committee as well. So at this time, I'd just like to ask if anyone would like to ask any questions. Diane?
Thank you very much. I was at the curriculum committee, and this is a very different presentation, and it really filled in a lot of my a lot of my gaps from what I wasn't quite getting in the early meeting. So thank you very much. Just a couple of questions. I'm looking at the slide, I guess slide 25, that has the progression on it. That one right there. So a student moving typically would have Math 4, then Math 5, then Math 6, then Math 7, then Math 8. Then in high school would start the algebra with integrated 1. That would be sort of the typical student?
That would be what
A
we would consider
standard level?
on level, yes.
Okay, and then there's accelerated. So it's conceivable that a student takes 5, 6 in 5th grade?
Yes,
And
that's what we currently do now
then
as well.
possibly 7, 8 in 6th grade, and then they would start integrated 1 in 7th grade,
That's correct.
and then integrated 2. So there's still a small number of students who might have to take the Keystone and the PSSA, but it's going to be a much smaller number. Is that can you give me a sense of how many students are in that accelerated path?
We currently have about 1 section of students at each school, 1 to 2 sections at each school. Classes
That
are that
accelerated, who would have been taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade.
Yes.
Okay. And the sample that Georgina did for us in your presentation, who did she give that lesson to? What class was she teaching when she taught that lesson?
She taught that lesson to an 8th grade on-level Algebra 1.
Okay. Great, thank you very much.
I wasn't at curriculum, so I apologize, but I have seen presentations about this before. I just have a clarifying question. Well, first of all, I think the elimination of the dual testing is great. That was an issue for one of my kids in 8th grade, and it's a major disincentive to take the PSSAs if you actually need the Keystone to graduate and they're, happening at the same time. What's the change if you're in accelerated math in 7th or 9th grade right now? Is there any?
If you're currently in accelerated 7th grade right now,
Yeah.
you would be in Algebra 1 at this point.
Okay, but is there anything about this program? I'm just trying to understand what's going to be different for that kid.
For a student that's already in the traditional sequence, We've worked to start infusing and embedding student-centered lessons into those courses as well. It's something that we've actually challenged the teachers with. It's a part of our professional development right now to do
Okay.
that. So when, as Mr. Copeland said, you know, the high schools are piloting certain modules. What we're doing is the units where the content overlaps, it matches into the traditional sequence. We can still pull an algebra unit from the integrated program, that student-centered approach, and use that in our traditional courses as well.
But did you mean a student who's actually in accelerated seventh?
Yes.
Or the, oh, okay. Then,
Is that, sorry, I'm confused.
They don't get the integrated.
Yeah.
They're
if
not
it-
going to switch into an integrated program. If they've started the traditional sequence, they're going to continue that. So if a student is in 7th grade accelerated right now, they're going to take geometry and then algebra 2. But within those courses, we're able to
Oh, I see.
take some of these student-centered inquiry-based ideas and infuse them into those courses.
You're calling accelerated the traditional sequence.
Yes.
Okay, that's what confused me. Okay, thank you.
This is not really a question. I was at curriculum also, and this, like Diane said, this is clearer for me. But I just wanted to make sure you keep, when you were talking about the problems, you keep saying real world, real world. I think when you're doing, and I'm glad that the teachers have the opportunity to mold their subjects or their examples to what relates to the children. So I just want to make sure that when you're doing this, make sure that it's not only real world, but relatable. Because if I was taking math, I can't relate to a pool. I mean, really, but there
Okay.
would be something else that I would be able to relate to might make me more receptible to math skills and to want to go on. So just relatable.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate all the work that's gone into this from everyone.
Thank you.
so this was, I think, was this the third Dr. Everslaw presentation we did? There's more to come. There's more to come.
Thank you, Jason.
Our next set of presentations is we have a series of new course offerings that we're recommending we get going with. And so, Mr. Cody, could you begin to introduce us?
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Good evening, everyone. This evening, we have a list of elective course offerings that have been really focused on by our teaching staff and for the betterment of our students and providing our students with a greater opportunity to go deeper within choices that they have a high level of interest in participating. So this evening you'll hear from several teachers around world language and course proposals for Spanish 6 and French 6. Our Family Consumer Science program will be presenting this evening baking and confections as a semester course elective. You'll be hearing from one of our social studies teachers around a course elective named Global Citizenship. And you'll be hearing from another one of our teachers / coordinators for a new program with business dual enrollment and a partnership with the University of the Sciences from Philadelphia. It's important to note that all of these courses have had a focus with our strategic plan. And within our strategic plan, there was a lot of reflection on the transformative goals that allowed teachers to be reflective back to that plan and create tight alignments and opportunities for students, where students had voice in selecting and talking about the designs of many of these courses that could help them further their education and experiences in these related fields. So first tonight, I would like to introduce Shannon Davis. Shannon is our World Language Department Chair at Harriton High School, and Allison Millay, our World Language Department Chair at Lower Merion High School. And with this particular program course proposal, we have a FLES program that starts in grade 1. And students in grade 1 through 5 will be placed in a world language class of French or Spanish, depending on the school in which they attend. Students then, in that 6th grade experience as they matriculate to the middle school, continue with that same language that they were experiencing in the elementary level. It's in 7th and 8th grade that students begin to have a selective choice of a world language and make that option and begin matriculating into the high school, where students come in at various different levels, and by the time they're seniors, they tend to cap out. And through the conversations and feedback that we've had from students, they were looking for additional options, and we did a dynamic job with our team and our leadership through our department chairs to realize that. So I'd like to turn it over to Allison and Shannon.
Thank you very much. We are grateful to be here this evening and very excited to propose French 6 and Spanish 6 honors at both high schools. This work, I think this is actually a perfect segue from the math proposal, because this has been work that we've been doing to better align our world language program from 1st to 12th grade for the past several years. The world language proposal also, I think, is a nice follow-up on math, because language learning, like math, has many elements that are skill-based and sequential, and proper alignment of the program is important for the student experience and for student learning. So it's often said with language learning that you use it or lose it, and the problem that we're trying to solve really is that our students are topping out of the courses in 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. So we have students who are going into sophomore, junior, senior year with no language course to take in that same language where they've reached the highest level of study and probably will go on and study that at the university level. So these Spanish 6 and French 6 for global competence courses would be available to our students who have completed Spanish 5 college prep, Spanish 5 honors or AP, and would enable our students to continue the language and move forward into that sixth year rather than leave them with a gap before they go on. It also is really a result of some work that we've done as a 1st to 12th grade team, where our high school teachers went to the 8th grade and assessed students and really found that some students may be better served by coming in at a little bit more advanced point. And having that 6th level course will enable us to place them correctly, yet not let them top out too early, which we don't want them to do. So the world language teachers got together and brainstormed and collaborated, and this is a really exciting process for us because these students are able to do a lot at this level. And so Allie is going to talk a little bit about what the courses will actually look like.
Thank you. At the very heart of these courses are several elements of the strategic plan, both transformative curriculum and redefining student success. The courses that teachers design for French and for Spanish both center around self-directed investigations, global competence, and use of the target language at the highest level. Throughout the course, students will engage in problem solving, personal interest, higher order thinking, and interdisciplinary studies. Some of the areas of focus will include study of the professions, law, education, medicine, service, tourism, and business, as well as current event issues in the target language. Another area of focus will be voices and voiceovers. Students will examine majority and minority voice and experience through culture and social justice, through film, art, music, all in the target language.
So we're happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Is there any chance that there's a 7, one, so you know, if as a junior you take this and you just had a blast and you want to do it again, and because if it's that real world and current events and stuff, things are going to change from year to the year. Would they be able to retake the course because the content will be different because things will have changed?
So in terms of learning, my first guess would be probably, But in terms of course name for a college, I would imagine there's probably a challenge there.
Seems something that could be explored. If people
Well, anytime somebody asks me if they can have another course to move up, I have a cash register that.
Well, see, I'd
you
put
could
these
take-
in the same, I'd put
I
them
know,
all in
you-
the same
you
class.
You could take a French 6 with a French 7.
Right.
I think what you're referring to is the colleges might look up and go, what exactly is this? So we'd have to think about it from that point of view too.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean you couldn't do it.
Certainly, we hope we run into that problem.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Sounds like a very cool class, so.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Our next course proposal will be facilitated by Jennifer Dawson. Jennifer is a teacher of family consumer science at Lower Merion High School, and would also like to recognize the other teachers, Larissa Binkley and Allison Drake, for their contribution to the team in bringing this particular course proposal forward, for allowing our students to extend their learning in the areas of food and baking. So with that, Allison or Jennifer?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to present the work of my colleagues and I. This course is a nice transition from what we've heard previously from the other two departments, because it's essentially developing another level, a new level. So we have offerings for kids from many different abilities and many different interests. It's interesting that we talked about, or in the other presentations, retaining students. One of the things that's happened in the time I've been teaching in the department is that we've had students who've sometimes taken courses they've already taken, and they realize they're not getting credit, but it's just something they enjoy doing. It's a nice break from their traditional day. They love the hands-on element. They like the practical nature of the skills they're learning, and so they take it even though they don't get credit for it. So we thought, well, why not seize that opportunity and really give them something that they can earn credit for and differentiate a little bit. The course would also work in some science. We would talk a lot about why things work the way they do, the chemistry of food. We could work in some art as well, as the students would do a lot of decorating, a lot of planning, a lot of talking about elements of art like the color wheel. This course, as I mentioned, was created based on student input, because we said to kids anecdotally, if you had the chance to take another course, what would you like it to be? And most kids like sweet things. Most people like sweet things. So baking and confection so far was kind of the hands down winner. So my colleagues and I did some research on courses that already existed. We investigated some textbooks. We found there's a lot of material out there for us to pull from, as well as the expertise that we all bring to the table. So we were hoping to develop a hands-on creative approach. It fits really well with the transformative goals, as you can see, because it taps into student passions. There's personal interests. They would be able to practice some of the skills that they might overlook in their more traditional academic courses. And it's really an upgrade to the current curriculum. We're not replacing anything. We're just adding a course for students to go further and go deeper in their explorations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do have a question, actually.
Sure.
So is sort of food and nutrition 1 and 2 a prereq for this course, or there?
Good question. That's actually something Mr. Cody and I talked about. We would prefer for students to have foods, at least foods 1, because they learn a lot about working in the kitchens and the facilities that we have. But what we were finding as we looked at the logistics of it is we might be missing out on students who, just by nature of the way the schedule works and the slots that the class is currently offered, might not be able to take it. So we would encourage but not require a background in the first class.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Do you have one?
Just have a comment. I think this is going to be a very popular
I
class.
do too.
I think so. I hope so.
I just know it will.
I do as well. So thank you for
Thank you very much. Thank you
all
for your
your work
time.
on the class.
Thank you.
So Thank you for welcoming us tonight. I'm Dr. Leslie Pratt. I'm one of the curriculum supervisors, and I'm here today to provide a very brief overview on global citizenship, which will be a new elective course in our social studies program planning guide next fall. This course is a complement to some of the really amazing work that is already happening within the district, that we have a long history of service. We have Build On, we have Interact, we have Best Buddies at both Lower Merion and Harriton High School, and these are really impactful extracurriculars that students participate in. We have a history of service learning courses. So these electives are separate from content area courses and allow students an opportunity to engage purposefully, meaningfully within the community. We also currently offer in our program planning guide 4 core social studies courses along with 8 non-IB elective courses within social studies. And those offerings of courses invite students to deepen and enrich their understanding of social studies. So this course is going to be an exciting addition to our already robust program planning guide. This one semester elective is meant to offer an action-oriented, community service-focused experience for interested students who will learn about global issues, who will think about local and larger impacts, and act in ways to make the world a better place. And there is no finer representative of the team who developed this course than Mr. Tom Reed, who is here to talk a little bit about what students' experiences within this course will look like. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Tom Reed, Lower Merion High School social studies teacher.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to present tonight. Many thanks to the school board and administration for allowing the opportunity to propose a course that has been long in the making and one in which I have a tremendous passion for. The true motivation behind this course is our strategic plan. I've always had a desire to create a course that would bring the classroom into the community and the community into the classroom. A course that would provide our students with these skills and understanding to be not only members of our global community, but leaders who contributed positive and realistic change in that community. Our strategic plan provided the blueprint needed to develop global citizenship. Ron Israel says a global citizen recognizes they are part of an emerging world community and they contribute to building this community's values and practices. As a part of this course, our students will explore the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes needed for responsible global citizenship, especially those related to leadership and community service. This course's student-centered approach combines academic learning with service opportunities. Curricular experiences expand beyond the classroom through service to our community. Specifically, we are going to study issues of social justice and globalization, including poverty, gender equity. We'll look at income inequality, human and civil rights, environmental sustainability, interdependence, and the preservation of cultural diversity. This will help students develop a true understanding of their global significance and the need to implement realistic solutions to problems and conflicts throughout our world. Students will deconstruct prejudices, challenge their assumptions, and develop openness in their views of others. The attitudes and values of self-esteem, philanthropy, empathy, tolerance, justice, and compassion will be stressed throughout this course. So what might this course look like? I'd like to provide an example unit on combating poverty. After students research the root causes and effects of poverty, collaborative groups are formed and presented with a fictional example of a local family that is struggling in poverty and trying to find solutions. Role-playing problem-based scenarios will be introduced to help students develop empathy for this family and others facing poverty. Groups are assigned to the task of finding government agencies and programs, NGOs, and other entities that can help this family in areas including health care for their children, food insecurity, supplying clothing and school supplies, transportation to a job, and needed daycare services. Students will develop an understanding of how powerful this information can be for families to have in order to improve their situation. They will use problem-solving skills to come up with further solutions they can personally implement within our own community. For a global perspective, students will compare this example of a local family to one in Beijing, China, or possibly a rural village in Kenya. Students will investigate how families in these communities might deal with the same challenges or even if they're challenges at all. A class trip to Cradles to Crayons and Conscihocken could be organized to witness an organization that works providing solutions to those in poverty. Students would interview volunteers and ask questions and express concerns that came up throughout this inquiry. From this visit, students might decide to volunteer at Cradles of Crayons to help within their service goals and the service hours that are required. They also could organize a drive to collect needed items and provide them for distributions to families in need. To wrap things up, a local politician could be invited into the classroom, be presented with student findings and solutions. A discussion on how government is dealing with poverty could take place, along with opportunities available to become further involved in combating the challenges facing poverty. We are very excited to offer this opportunity to our students next year and excited to serve the community. I am greatly appreciative of your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions at this time?
So you say you're going to provide scenarios?
Yes.
Would you consider having actual people in from, Project Home or Witnesses to Hunger or from the food banks? So that way, or even from, centers that house or home women and their children who have left abused families. Will those kinds of actual, real people, not just scenarios about people, be part of this experience for the students?
They sure would. That would be our goal of bringing the community into the classroom. And through Build On right now, we've developed many connections with organizations throughout our community that we could bring experts and those who dedicated their lives to these problems into the classroom to discuss them with our students.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We're really excited about the class.
Thank you. Me too.
We can tell. We got that, which is great.
This evening, our last presentation for our course proposals / program proposal is for the dual enrollment program partnership with the University of the Sciences. Before I present this evening, I'd like to recognize Dr. Laura Pontiggi. Laura is the Associate Dean from the University of the Sciences and joined us this evening and heard that we were presenting, so asked if she could be present to be a part of and listen to the presentation. So thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Good evening, everyone.
So in 2017, the spring of 2017, we learned from Penn State Brandywine campus that Penn State was going to discontinue their dual enrollment program with partnering schools. And that left a great void in our program for business education. And Lindsay Canuso, who is a business teacher at Harriton High School and the Penn State dual enrollment coordinator, will be speaking with you later this evening, sharing a bit about the program of the University of the Sciences. But what's important to know is that leading into this exploration of a new dual enrollment program, Lindsay, myself, and the rest of the team set out on some explorations to visit various colleges and universities in the community and outside of the community to find partnerships for a dual enrollment program to support the continuation of business education learning for our students, for the students here in Lower Merion. And we have a great interest and a great value for that. And we visited local colleges such as Harcum, Bryn Mawr, Westchester University, Drexel University, and went as far as the University of Pittsburgh to learn about some of the dual enrollment programs and the partnerships that they had to offer. And we finally fell upon and recognized the dual enrollment program from the University of the Sciences. And the University of the Sciences had a great deal to offer to the Lower Merion School District students, as well as the community and the supports. And one of the things that really intrigued the University of the Sciences through our conversation is the level of involvement that we have within our own strategic plan. And they felt compassionate about that and wanted to find ways to support the plan. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lindsay Canuso to share her presentation tonight about dual enrollment.
I'm very excited to be here, so I just want to thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to speak tonight. As Brian has said, there's been a lot of work that has gone into this. I have been the coordinator with the dual enrollment program for 9 years with Penn State University. So one of the conversations that I've had with the business department is one that many conversations is how could we get this at Lower Merion High School to provide that opportunity to the students at Lower Merion as well as at Harriton. And once we were notified about Penn State, it's been about 18 months that we've kind of known this is coming and have done a lot of the research that Brian has said. And a lot of parents and students, even at back to school night 2 weeks ago, parents were asking me, so what's the plan? And I said, hopefully something's on the table, but I can't talk about it yet. And there was a lot of questions from students. And one of the main reasons is because we only offer 5 business courses right now through the Lower Merion School District at Harriton and Lower Merion, and that's with those courses, a lot of our students who are truly interested in business are tapping off, just like in all the other courses you've heard, a lot by the end of sophomore year. Several students, even this semester, I have multiple sets that have me for Foundations of Business and Entrepreneurship. So by the end of sophomore year and beginning of junior year, there are no other business courses or opportunities for those students to take. And the Penn State Dual Enrollment Program was a program and courses that kind of filled that void, as Brian said, for those students. And it's a lot of our students have taken, and a lot of the students I've taught, I've had now for 4 years through the 5 courses that we offer, and then through the dual enrollment program. The current courses, these courses will be offered to the juniors and seniors, and they will begin kind of going through this process their sophomore year. The one thing that we're excited with the new proposed partnership with the Youth Science is the students will have choice. So you will see that there are 4 courses provided, but with the dual enrollment with Penn State, it was a 2-year program that they had to go through in a sequential order to get through those courses. And we are very excited that the Youth Sciences is offering the 4 courses, but the students can really choose and decide which courses they would like to take with the support of the business education teacher. These courses will provide students the opportunity to take the college level courses, but have that help and support of the teacher in the classroom, as well as during class, as well as lunch and learn, and in the learning center. So there's a lot of help coming from and support to help those students feel confident in order to complete the college courses. As you can see, here are the 4 different courses that are being offered. So we have an Introduction to Business Seminar, Introduction to Marketing Management. So the way that we would kind of phase these in, it would be over 2 years, we would phase 1 course in at a time. So we would start with our Introduction to Business Seminar the fall 2019. In spring 2020, the students would have the opportunity to continue in that and have another elective in Intro to Marketing Management. The following year, we would still offer, again, the Introduction to Business Seminar and Marketing Management for the incoming juniors, but we would also offer accounting and Principles of Management would be in the spring of 2021. And the one thing I really loved about these courses is that there is no overlap with the other courses that we're currently offering. So we are allowing our students to go through the other 5 courses already offered, freshman and sophomore year, and then continuing in this program for 4 more additional courses that will kind of extend on the foundation that we have provided through the business department at Harriton High School in Lower Merion. So it's an excellent opportunity, and a lot of students reach out to me that have graduated from the dual enrollment program. I hear from them all the time, and I get a lot of feedback on how it prepared them, but also how they would like more courses. And if we had an accounting, if they're majoring in business or accounting and their professor said, you know, you really need a foundation in those courses. And the one thing that we loved about University of the Sciences is if you knew about the dual enrollment program with Penn State, there was only one professor teaching all 4 courses the last few years. And one thing I really advocated for was I felt that students need to see and learn from a different professor. The University of the Sciences has dedicated one professor for each course that is specialized in that course, that will guarantee the rigor of the course is taught the same way it will be as if it were on the university campus.
So the same professor teaching Introduction to Business Seminar would also be teaching that course at Lower Merion and at Harriton. So there's also excellent collaboration between those and how to truly support our students through this curriculum. So we would have the first year 2 different professors working with our teachers, and then by year 2, fall 2020, we would have 4 different professors, which is an absolute amazing experience for our students from what I've heard from them and the parents. As far as logistics of the programs, kind of to speak about how this looks and what the students are actually going through. Just as I have in the past, I begin recruiting and promoting this program in 8th grade. And I truly begin speaking to the students during our annual move-up day. Students begin applying in the program the fall of their sophomore year. So once this hopefully gets approved, we begin marketing this out to the current sophomores and juniors to have them go through the application. And the application process is an application that I have been working with University of the Science to create for both Lower Merion and Harriton High School. Students will complete the application, they will write a personal statement, and I try to take them through that college application process because they're only sophomores. So there's a lot of support that they need. We get their transcripts from the student services and their PSAT scores. And then I kind of meet, there's a committee. So the program committee consists of Assistant Dean Laura from the University of Sciences would be on that committee, Brian Cody, the dual enrollment coordinator, as well as the business education teacher that would be in the classroom. And what we do is we look through all of the applications to see if a student is qualified or we think they would be successful in this program since it is a college course. And then sometimes there's a lot of conversations that happen between the student and the parents, especially since they are sophomores in high school when they're applying for this program. And then there's an interview process, and I sit down with the students. There's a lot of mixed emotions, excitement, they're nervous, it's their first experience with an interview, and I kind of prepare them for that, talk about how you dress, who to speak to in the class, what type of questions to prepare them for, and it really is it gives them that whole experience as a sophomore on the interview process, and it's unbelievable how much you learn about these kids in 10 minutes, 15 minutes that really helps you, figure out what kind of support they're going to need in that class as they're taking a college course at such a young age. So it's a lot that we do. We'll sit down with the parents and the students and answer any questions that they may have. There's a lot of questions once they actually get accepted. So after we go through the interview process and we have the applications, we send everything to the University of Science and they make the decision on whether the child or the student can get into the program. And then we kind of sit down and we'll give advice on whether or not we feel it's a good fit for the student. Once the students have been accepted, they will receive an acceptance letter from the university. As you can see, the tuition rate, which is great, is $300 per credit. A student sitting at the campus taking the same course is going to pay $823 per credit. So it is a great reduced tuition for those students. The cost of the textbook, lab materials, and instructional materials will be responsibility of the student and the family that the university says is needed for those courses. So I'm very excited about creating the partnership with the University of the Sciences and truly transforming the business education department to align with the strategic plan and allow the opportunity for students at both high schools to take higher level courses taught by a college professor. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very exciting, and we appreciate the dean being here, which is great. Thank you. I actually have a couple of questions about how many students do we think are likely to be enrolled in this over time, and how many students, if students apply, are most of them getting in? Are we expecting this to be only a few students who apply? So I just wanted some sense of that. And then the other question I had was about, do we have financial assistance for students whose families may not be able to afford that tuition and books? So those were my questions, and then I'll open it up if other people have.
Okay, so as far as financial assistance, so we do provide tuition for the students on free and reduced lunch. We have been doing that in the past, so I'm assuming that's something that we would continue to do. As far as the numbers, kind of looking back, so we started this in 2009, and I have been in this position since that time. We probably have gotten, roughly between 22 to 35 students. Sometimes usually it's about 40 to 50 that start with the application process, and then as we kind of go through it and see scheduling and the course and how it fits, we get to roughly 22 to 25. And then it depends if those students are seniors, whether they can continue in the program. So sometimes that senior courses may be a little bit lower, depending. This could look a little different because it's the 4 a la carte courses. And as far as Lower Merion, this would be a new program and opportunity for that. So I could really only speak on behalf of Harriton.
Does anyone else have any questions? So, again, thank you. It's very exciting. Thank you for all your
Thank you
work
so
and
much.
for coming and presenting.
Thank you for all of the, just the curiosity of University of Science. Penn State had a good football team. Does the University of Sciences?
Their women's basketball team is good.
I really do want to thank all the teachers who came out tonight. We're going to have to work hard to get them to come out of their shell. You can see that they really are excited, and that makes it work. Thank you all.
At this time, if anyone would like to speak to any issue, an agenda or a non-agenda item, can you please come up and sign in with Ms. LaPera. If you can tell us your name, 3 minutes. Everybody knows the drill, I think. So is there anyone who would like to speak at this time? No? Okay. All right. I think with that, I will just say that the next, I'm sorry, come on up, Crystal.
Can I sign it after?
Yes.
Or you want me to sign it now?
And I'll just go on to say that our next education meeting will be on November 12th, but we're going to have public comment.
That's a nice program you're running. It's very interesting. I was just wondering, oh, I'm sorry, Crystal Blunt Ardmore. I was just wondering, are there going to be any other elective courses maybe being considered, given that we just had an education summit and some of the students of color were voicing that they really don't see themselves in a lot of the curriculum. And I was just wondering if there's something going to be offered as an alternative for those students or of color as another thing to think about.
Do you have any other course offerings coming up?
We don't have course offerings this month or next month coming up, no, but we're always considering options to add to the program.
Well, I just think since you attended that summit and you did hear those 2 young ladies passionately speak about their experiences, that one might want to think about looking at offering students of color other alternatives so that they can see themselves reflected, at least in the curriculum that they say they don't see themselves reflected in. And the math piece at the middle level, I was just wondering how that impacts investigations at the elementary level, and how does that feed into what you're doing at the middle level?
Jason, I don't believe it does, except that we are looking at how to gain access towards the middle-level courses, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think at this point, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.